I'm Hilary Rand, partner at Think Hospitality. We do a lot in the food and beverage side of the sector. We advise and look at problem statement solving. So we're going to talk about today now about branded residences, really hot new topic. We are actually up against the AI guys in the other room. So apparently AI is winning, which is the future. So before we go into the session and the questions, let's do a small round of introduction. So let's start all the way over there.
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
Right. My name is Chris Graham. I fell into real estate about 25 years ago as Group Marketing Director at Hamptons International. And I've worked on luxury and branded residential all over the world for about the last 2 decades. I'm probably quite well known in the industry, hence why I'm here, because I write 2 reports, which are quite popular. So if you ever need to get hold of a copy, they're free on my website. But yes, we'll probably touch on that.
Absolutely. Rakesh?
Rakesh Patel, owner of RJP Design, and we specialize in residential sector, and primarily at the moment, branded residences.
Tina Norton, I'm partner and principal at Conran & Partners. We're architects and interior designers based in London, actually just around the corner. We specialize in hospitality and residential, so I guess we sit somewhere in between, and some of them have been branded as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Charlie Walsh, and I look after the sales and marketing of the OWO residences done by Raffles in London, and I work for a private family office developing that.
Fantastic. When I did the previous panel on lifestyle, I started with a quote because there's some beautiful quotes in the green room there by George Bernard Shaw. So I think this is a good one for this session, or in any session. Beware of false knowledge. It's more dangerous than ignorance. So I think in this panel, Chris, I'm looking to you as to be like the absolute source of knowledge when it comes to branded residences. Oops, exactly. And I thought before we go in the questions, I'll do a quick fire round to each of you. So let's start with you, Chris. True or false? Branded residences are a safer investment than traditional luxury real estate.
Depends on location. False.
Got it. Rakesh, yes or no? Future-proofing interior design for rebrands is possible without sacrificing brand integrity.
Yes, very much so.
Charlie, Tina next. True or false? Designing a branded residence is more about maintaining brand standards than allowing personal expression.
Can I say in between? Because I think it's both.
True and false. Got it. And Charlie, yes or no? The expansion of branded residences into upscale and mid-scale markets is inevitable.
True.
Cool. So I thought one thing, we are up against the AI guys in the other room, so I'm bringing a bit of AI into this. I asked ChatGPT to give me an overview of what is the branded residences sector. So Charlie, you can be the ticking. You can tell me whether it's right or wrong. Just some quick stats. As of November 24, there are approximately 740 completed branded residence developments worldwide, and that's going to grow, projected to grow 100% over the next 7 years. Sound about right in terms of size?
Yeah, in fact, the latest research I was just reading, which I've just got hold of, there were about 750, 60 that are currently open, but within the pipeline, if you add that in fact, there's about 1,630 something projected, which is interesting because last year some research was saying, we expect there'll be over 1,500. So it gives you an idea of just how quickly the market's growing. It's even exceeding the expectations.
And then hotel brands continue to dominate this, accounting for about 80%, 85%?
Yeah, it is about 80%. 20% are non-hospitality brands. But the numbers in both segments are growing, expanding. I mean, one of my reports, which is the brand compendium, I've got about 200 brands listed in there. There are about 60 non-hospitality brands, and they're just growing every week.
Then I asked AI, give me the top 5 reasons why this investment class is so popular. So let's see if we can match what AI said. So I will give you all a chance to come up with one. So let's start with you, Rakesh. Why do you think this investment class is so popular? One reason.
Location, brand, heritage. You're buying into investment, which at the moment is only going to increase. So a lot of our clients are buying these branded residences purely at some point for investment.
Right. Tina, why do you think it's...
I would liken it to buying something like a branded handbag. So if you're buying a Louis Vuitton or a Gucci, people buy into the brand and everything that stands for. So it's aspiration, but it's also buying them taste.
Charlie?
Yeah, I think a lot of the younger generation are aligning themselves with specific brands, and they like to see that brand not only come through in their lifestyle vis-a-vis the clothes they wear, the cars they drive, the places they go on holiday, but also it exudes through their actual very living in terms of the real estate, the bricks and mortar as well.
And Chris?
Honestly, there is such a huge number of factors that you can bring together, but I distilled it down in my research into two things. One is convenience and the other is confidence. The element of trust is incredibly important, which we've heard talked about earlier, particularly in emerging locations. And the confidence is, as far as the experience for the owner, for the homeowner, indeed for the developer as well, in terms of what it can bring them in terms of a seamless release. They are hitting the ground running with a product that people recognize and they know and hopefully aspire to own.
So ChatGPT said, 1, premium pricing and value retention. Number 2, turnkey luxury living and services. Number 3, strong rental and yield potential. Number 4, global brand trust and security. And number 5, growing demand from high net worth individuals. So I think we hit most of them without the help of AI. So now on to some questions. So going back to sort of the brand and how much is the value driven by the brand versus the location, the market demand. So maybe we start with you, Chris.
A brand isn't a panacea. It has to be right for the location. We've had this discussion earlier about why certain brands work better in certain locations. There's a lot of thought that goes into selecting the right brands. And if a developer goes to, say, Accor or Marriott and says, I want that brand, there's a very strong chance that they're going to turn around and say, actually, you can't have that brand because we don't think it's right for the location. There's too much at risk not to get it right. The equation has to balance.
And Tina, you mentioned, it's like owning a Louis Vuitton handbag. There's some brand value with that. But now when we look at those sort of non-hospitality brands like fashion houses, for example, and it loses relevance, that brand loses relevance, then what happens to the real estate value? Charlie, if you want to comment on that.
So I think it just go back to Chris's point about choosing the brand over, and taking into account the location. There's a reason why the Candy Brothers, for example, did not call One High Park Mandarin Oriental Residences, because they believe the location in Knightsbridge, that central location, and the bricks and mortar and the real estate surrounding it was more valuable than the brand that was eventually labelled onto it. So I think there's an important part, and again to Chris's point, you can find a very D- location, and a developer will say, I need to lift the confidence in this location. It's a beach in the middle of Thailand or wherever it is, and people don't know it. They need trust and confidence in it. And therefore, a developer will inherently turn around and say, okay, let's bring in a Four Seasons, let's bring in an MO or whoever it is to try and verify that location, versus, say, a central London A+ prime central location. And I think they will then realize, actually, okay, the brand might help us from a sales and marketing perspective and lift the eventual values, but actually the inherent location is important and strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet. So I think that's an important part to bear in mind, and I think it's something that, from personal experience, we are going through at the OWO, the Old War Office, where we have Raffles London. It's an incredible brand. We chose that brand because it was the first and only ever Raffles hotel in the UK. If you look at the MO or Four Seasons, they are churning these brands out across the UK and across London. And I'm sure Raffles probably have an intention to do the same thing at some point. But I think we wanted to be the first in there to have that label on us. But also we work extremely hard to not only just have it as a Raffles brand, but also to promote the brand of the destination, which is the OWO, which I think is very important. That tussle, I think, Chris, you'll see as well, and in terms of who has that limelight is quite crucial.
Just remind us, how many residences at the OVO?
So we have 85 residences, yeah. And it's the first Raffles branded residences in Europe. So it's a big deal for them. It's important for us. It's a big deal for them. And I think it was key for us to work with an operator who he knew had the right level of hospitality and DNA. I think DNA is actually critical in terms of what we're churning out for the end buyer.
Rakesh, you worked on a couple of those units there in the residences. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Correct. I think, location is critical for all our clients, but the heritage element was just as important. They are buying into that heritage. Base build, and the link to Raffles, link to the location was critical. I think, the base build design becomes somewhat sort of second fiddle to the building. So I think the buyers need that ability to be able to customize, So I think from a developer point of view, I think the level of base build, level of offering, becomes almost superficial. A lot of these clients are buying, yes, into the brand, but they're buying into that kind of service philosophy that Raffles can offer to them. But behind their threshold, their door, it's ability for us to create their sanctuary, their place or home. And with the likes of Raffles, Peninsula, it's not a rental pool offering. So the ability is there to be able to customize and make it your own.
And obviously one of the big draws of the branded residences is the sort of, for a developer, is the cash up front, right? It's a lot of what we see is being sold much before anything else happens. So in the case of Raffles, is everything sold on that side, or where are we?
Not quite. We're nearly there.
Yeah.
So if you want to buy one after this, we can have a conversation.
Yeah, sure.
No,
Fantastic.
we're about half sold, and it's been really interesting seeing which buyer demographics have sort of zeroed in on the development. And actually what's quite interesting as well is seeing what their intended end use is, which is what Rakesh is alluding to now. So if you take, for example, the Manor Rental residences in Hanover Square, called Hanover Bond, they were designed very bespoke. Bespoke is the wrong word. They were designed very much cookie cutter in terms of efficient spaces, 450, 500 square foot one beds, 800, 900 square foot two beds. They were designed for a rental pool. And it comes slightly onto what Rakesh was saying, which was in order for them to be in that rental pool, they had to have a very sort of set interior design and furniture layout.
They were all sold, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
exactly right. Our development is completely the opposite to that. It is a purchase done by our residents for the end enjoyment, end use. They're not doing it to let it out. They're doing it because they see it as a piece of history, and therefore they're bespoking it through the use of people like Rakesh.
Tina, over to you. When did you get involved with Conrad Partners in the branded residence space?
It was kind of an organic development, really, because we're focusing so much on hospitality and we've done a lot of residential. So it made sense for clients to approach us for hotel projects that had residences attached to that. And that's really how we kind of got into that. And actually, most of the projects we've worked on were probably more along the lines of what you were talking about, not necessarily cookie cutter, but more kind of part of a hotel. So as a result of that, they were designed as part of the inventory, but people were investing in them. So that's a very, very, very different thing. I completely agree with you that, if you're buying it to rent it out 95% of the time, you just want it to be open the door, everything's there, you don't need to worry about it, it's all service, etc. You're not buying it as a home necessarily. So it's two polar opposites, and it's very important for us as designers to understand at the beginning which one are we looking at? Are we looking at both? Is it one in particular, so we can design accordingly? Because if we know that people are going to be ripping it out effectively and building their own, you will approach the design very differently to something that is effectively going to stay like that, and people might change the sofas.
And Rakesh, if you can also touch a little bit on another pretty fantastic product here in London, opening same time as OVO, is the Peninsula. So you've done some work in their residences as well.
Yeah, two complete different offerings. I think obviously Peninsula location, it sells itself almost. Hyde Park Corner. But again, their approach to base build was very different there. They're building from scratch, and the level of people buying there are going to wholesale change. So I think the careful selection of materials, I think the sustainability comes into it quite strongly. People are combining apartments, ripping out wholesale, and putting their own personalised taste on it. And as Charlie said, the way the lease agreements are are sort of in place, it allows the buyer to do so within LTA reasons. But you know, the great part about the OO, you know, superficial sort of aesthetics, as I said, become second nature because you're buying into that heritage. You know, the apartments have their nuances, their quirkiness, sort of hallways or nooks and crannies, and I think that's a part of the charm. Whereas I think Peninsula, its location, it's for those people that want to be on the cusp of Knightsbridge. So they're two different markets, but two very different propositions.
Yet not so distant from each other. So that's quite, I think, quite interesting. Chris, looking at where are the opportunities currently, what market is getting the most attention from this segment? What are we seeing?
Well, in terms of opportunities, it's there really is no end. The market continues to surprise me every year in terms of the breadth of brands, the breadth of locations. We've started to see traction in South America taking off. It's really coming up. APAC region has just overtaken North America, which has traditionally led in the sector.
Yeah.
And the projection, if you include the pipeline, it's actually now number one. The opportunities will continue to surprise us because the market needs to keep evolving. It can't stay static. And this is very much consumer-led, but it's also driven by new technologies, by innovative developers who are looking for ways, coming back to a discussion that we've had repeatedly, which has been the theme of most of my reports, is differentiation. You know, it is a very crowded marketplace. People need to stand out. And as part of that differentiation and developing that, we're going to start seeing some quite interesting things coming through. We already are. You know, I can't list them here, but certainly, you know, happy to talk about what indeed in my report. But F&B, sustainability, wellness, longevity, all of these elements are now becoming not nice to haves, but actually imperatives. And the ones that don't have those to offer are going to fall behind. So it really is becoming an extremely big career. Just on that point, I mean, about a brand, I slightly glibly said, you know, they're not the best investment. They are in terms of what they can deliver. They yield higher prices, they yield higher ROI in terms of rentals, but it depends on the location, depends on the brand. It also depends on the sustainability of that brand. You know, people tastes change. You know, by and large, I mean, it's the confidence area. We talked about planting a flag in an emerging location, for example. You know, if you are a buyer, you want to know it's going to be delivered to the standard that you want. And if a major brand is planting its flag and says, we are building on this site, you can have a degree of confidence that it's actually going to be done, and it's going to be done to the quality standard and service standard that you expect. For example, I've been running a project in St. Lucia. It's there. It's a Hyatt project. It is already 90% sold out, and it doesn't open till the end of this year. Now, from the developer's point of view, that's a great investment. And indeed, from the owner's point of view, that's a great investment, because as soon as it opens, the prices are going to rocket and so on. So it does depend on the location, it depends on the mix, but it also depends on the right products and so on. So it takes quite a lot of careful thought and analysis to do it. And part of the research that I've done, and I've spoken to many of the brands, the heads of the brands, and the developers are becoming much smarter. They're asking the right questions now, and they are actually becoming a lot more demanding about what they expect the brand to do for them. And fundamentally, it boils down to two things. Is this brand going to help me to sell my residences at the highest price and the most quickly? Those are the two things that they really want to know. There's a lot of other things associated with, but fundamentally, that's what it is.
And like looking at the development and what we can see in the coming years, and Charlie, I asked you that in the yes and no at the beginning, are we going to see this branded residences also kind of leave only the luxury element and see that more in the sort of upper mid-scale brands? What's your thought?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're already seeing it now with people like John Lewis turning around and saying we're going to create branded residences here in London. So I think it started off as the sort of the departure of the top end luxury tier. I think we're going to see it increasingly come down to some mid-tier, which is more accessible to a wider market.
And for Tina and Rakesh, for your questions, when you get approached by clients, is it currently right now only on the luxury level, or are you seeing other brands approach you as well to work in maybe that category, or tipping their toe in there?
I mean, on live projects, the projects we've done, it has been luxury.
Yeah.
But the conversations we're having is definitely kind of diversifying a lot more. And I think a lot more people are starting to go, hang on a minute, this is an interesting sector that we can tie into. And obviously, with the rise of the likes of, BTR here in the UK, people looking for places to stay that have, DNA, that have, other offerings around just having, your apartment, it becomes more and more interesting. And I think as part of those conversations, these other brand levels are coming into it.
And Rakesh, do you see the same?
At the moment, pretty much on the luxury end. But in terms of location, we looked at sort of stuff in the Cotswold, looked at some of the stuff in home counties, where some of these guys actually want home away out of London. So that's another part we've looked at, but not at the mid-tier at this moment in time.
And another question for you, Tina, because you focus both on the residential side and the hotel side. How different it is then to go and take that creativity that you as architects and designers have and apply that to the branded residences space?
Well, so it's a very interesting one, because traditionally we've always said, hotels are the best playing field for designers, because you have so much opportunity to create experiences, you've got F&B, you've got so many different components. But actually, over the last years, residential has really caught up with that. And a lot of the residential developments we're working on, yes, they have kitchens and bathrooms, but they have fantastic clubhouses, they have all sorts of facilities that typically you would have associated with a hotel. So, and we have a lot of young designers coming and saying, I don't really want to work on residential, that's really boring.
Yeah.
But actually they're going, hang on a minute, what is all of that that's happening? So I think it's really shifting. So now when we're designing residences, whether they're branded or otherwise, there's always that kind of additional layering there. And there's also there's a lot of stuff on the market. How do we differentiate? How do we create something that is unique, special, has that USP that people say, actually, I want to buy that and I don't want to buy that, and I'm happy to pay a premium for it. And that's where kind of design and those special offerings, services, all of that come into it, and can obviously really help the developer to up the ante on the prices.
And you see the same, Rakesh, from your side?
Definitely. I think that, coming from an architectural background and working for Reardon Smith purely on hotels for 7.5 years, it's really helped to sort of lap and merge from hospitality to the residential side. Just from not just from a design point of view, from an operational point of view, it's key. Without a good backbone operationally, you can't provide that service, that seamless service that the OO or the Peninsula can. So I think, it's critical.
Over to you, Chris, because one thing you mentioned, I think, is because a lot of things have to align for this product to be successful, as with a lot of other products. If things don't go so well, because obviously some of these agreements are very long, then it needs to be rebranded. Can you tell us a little bit about those complexities, the legals that get involved, and how challenging that actually is, and what a risk that is for the investment?
It's going to be interesting, because a lot of the contracts are for about 25 management contracts to about 25, 30 years and so on. But of course, the ownership of the real estate is considerably longer. So what happens if the brand is changed and you are an owner and you paid for, a Mandarin Oriental, ends up being an Ibis or something. So, there are many, many issues that have to be taken into account. And a good lawyer will raise these, and the contracts have to cover it, because it has to protect the developer's normally sold and gone, so he doesn't really mind. But there are many, many considerations to take into account. I'd just like to touch on this issue of luxury, because to put some numbers on where the market is, it was historically, it's always been at the luxury end of the market. It is now just over between 50 and 55% of the market are now luxury. But interestingly, and I've been predicting this in my reports for quite a long time, the emergence of mid-scale to upscale is actually the exciting growth opportunity in the market. Why? Because it's become a mainstream product. This kind of branded service accommodation is becoming much more mainstream than it used to be. And therefore, you know, if you're used to 3-star and you stay in 4-star, that's luxury. It's a relative thing. And therefore, you don't need as many gold taps and marble, but you can still offer the quality of service. And that's why brands like Wyndham are going to probably hit the market quite hard. And it makes it much more accessible to a much bigger audience.
Let's have some questions. So we have,
My microphone.
come on. Oh, there we go, right behind you. Leading us to drinks.
Hi, I'm Jill from True North. I have a question in relation to the planning use, given the straddles in between kind of the residence and the hospitality element of it. So have you seen it all sort of exclusively be like C3 residential or some of them in C1 sort of hospitality? Very curious.
Charlie?
So it's a really interesting question, that one. At the OWO, for example, WCC, Westminster City Council, have forbidden us to create a renter pool. So any owner at the OWO cannot rent the residence through the Raffles Hotel rental pool. So I think, to your point, it is becoming more and more complicated in terms of setting out what these use classes are. And I think increasingly councils and governments are going to start being more wary with the whole Airbnb sort of motion behind us and various cities banning it, very conscious of these short-term rentals. So yeah, that's what we found. Correct. Yeah. So you are not. Yeah, it's prohibited. Yeah. Yeah.
Great question.
Any other questions?
There, over there.
Thanks, Andrew. Roger Allen, RLA Global. What brand doesn't currently exist in the branded resi market
You took my last question.
you would like to see enter the market, and why? And that's for each panel member, just to make
Good
it clear.
question.
I would say senior living. I think there's a huge gap in the market for 55, 60 plus that people can have that kind of branded, managed experience. It will include having wellness clinics and medical support and so on. But I've worked and I've talked to a lot of people about this. I worked on a big project in the States looking at longevity, looking at supporting this. And I'm absolutely convinced that there is an opportunity, because if you buy into branded residences and it's a chain, say that there's half a dozen locations around Europe or the Far East or wherever it might be. If you own one, you can have that lifestyle, you can be looked after and so on. And then wouldn't it be great if you suddenly think, I'm a bit bored of the Algarve, I fancy going, here, and being able to swap it within the network and exchange it with other owners who might want to swap. That's the kind of area that I think. I mean, I could talk about several others, but I actually think that that's one which nobody has yet done.
Rakesh?
If you can give me a second, I'll jump back.
Charlie?
We've seen fashion, we've seen cars. I wonder whether, there's a kind of Hollywood direction of maybe, some of the big games or, the kind of Marvel characters or that kind of thing. So it kind of
They do. They have Disney.
Disney is
They
doing
already
50
have
hours
Disney.
plus,
There's
yeah.
12 Disney developments in India.
But are they specific to a particular thing, or is it just Disney?
No, they've just got cartoons on the walls everywhere. It's a nightmare anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, and characters
I'm behind-
walking around the
I'm behind
village
the
is what I read. It's bizarre.
So I'm going to go for tech, because we're talking a lot of tech about it. I can see, and I'm not an Apple user, but I suspect 90% of you in the room are Apple users. I can see an Apple branded residences where the tech is intrinsic throughout the building, the whole DNA, the BMS systems, etc. And Apple really sort of pushing and driving that whole community and sort of brand loyalty.
An iHome.
iHome,
iHome, there we go. iFlat.
iResidence. Did you have a
I don't- I
light bulb moment?
I think it's got to have stability. Whatever happens, it's got to have stability, whether it's a fashion brand or an iHome. The Disney in India, what's their longevity? Is it too gimmicky,
Yeah.
I think
This is the whole thing about fashion brands. I mean, Rakesh, is that look, they come in and out of fashion, and if you've had it
Correct.
designed today, because it looks great. In 30 years' time, it's probably going to look extremely dated. The other point is, if you have the personality cult associated with that brand, and that goes wrong, then
Or they get cancelled.
Huh?
Or they get cancelled. So I mean, I've got
think Adidas and Kanye West.
Yeah.
Okay, that cost them over $1 billion, and that's exactly right, Charlie. They can get cancelled.
So
Things change.
I've got
but
a
Nick
well,
Candy. You
yeah.
talked about Nick Candy earlier. Do you remember we were at that conference in Dubai? And Nick Candy sat there and he said, "I would never invest in a non-hospitality brand. I think it's like owning a fake handbag."
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think I've got clients who own Trump Tower.
I was about to ask.
And
yeah.
they are, they can't sell the residence.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't get rid of it. I mean, maybe they'll sell it to a Trump supporter, but...
Well, actually, they're going up now. I actually researched that. After he got elected the first time, he lost contracts, particularly in the Muslim world, and people actually voted to take his name off the buildings and so on. But now, actually, this time, it's going up and he's signing deals, particularly with Dahl Global. They're doing a lot.
We're actually advising someone in that development, and they just sent through their values, the Trump organization. Number 1, trustworthiness. Number 2, considerate, sensitive. Number 3, humility. Number 4, supportive. Number 5, open. And number 6, straight talking.
No tariffs.
I said I will not work on this project. So,
Trustworthy.
any other closing questions, or are we all ready for a drink?
I'm going to have just a very quick question. It's a sort of a plug for our next event, which is the Operational Real Estate Festival on the 24th of June. But we talk a lot at that about build to rent, and you've mentioned it a few times, and the branded build to rent. And we've had Ryan Prince, who's well known to this audience in terms of his hotel piece and his creation of the Uncle brand. Where does the sort of branded BTR end and the branded residences begin? Is it simply a case of one's about ownership and one's about rental, or is there something different between those two?
Well, we talked about what the difference between serviced apartments and BTR is, and the answer was really the lengths of stay. But I think between BTR and obviously branded residences, BTR is to rent. It's a renter proposition. So people move in there for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it might be, but they don't own the property. And I think that's the big difference.
Pretty much, yeah. There are things called condo hotels, which are effectively hotels with suites, and private owners buy the suites, and then they rent them out. But they have limited usage attached to them. They are freehold, and they generate very generous yields by and large. I'm working on 2 at the moment, and that is an area that I think we're going to see more of as well. It's quite an attractive way of setting up and financing a development.